I feel really honored to be the one introducing this show. Sarah's been doing an independent study this semester, and I have gotten the pleasure to work with her all 4 years that she's been here. I am so proud of her growth over that time. So I want to thank you all for coming out to this opening. It means a lot to be able to open these shows with such a wonderful crowd. And with that said, what's going to happen is Sarah is going to tell us a bit about her exhibition. And after she introduces the work, she's going to open up for some questions. Hopefully, as you're listening, you'll come up with some good questions for Sarah for later. And then we'll wrap up. And you can enjoy the food and enjoy the opening. Thank you so much for coming.
Again, just thank you all so much for coming. Like, it seriously means so much to me that you're all here. Like, I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to thank my friends and family for supporting me throughout my 4 years at Davidson. Really, again, means so much to me. And I want to thank Katie, because I'm so lucky to be your student, and you really, like, I could cry. Like, you like mean so much to me, and I've learned so much from you, so thank you. But yeah, welcome. So I'm just gonna jump into it. But yeah, so first, kind of to get oriented, I want to talk about like what I think about when I'm like creating a piece and like the composition of the pieces. So I usually have like a figure in relationship to objects around it, and this relationship is really important to the meaning of the piece. And I kind of think of my pieces as like scenes from a play, kind of. They're very like theatrical to me, and yeah, I guess the play is kind of like my life. But yeah, so I draw a lot from like my experiences growing up in the Deep South. I grew up in Alabama, and coming to a liberal arts college, and kind of how that's changed my perspective of things. And yeah, my pieces are mostly self-portraiture, which is kind of funny because I don't really think of them that way. I feel like once they're on the canvas or like the drawing, like they become something different. I kind of see them like as objects in a way, and I think this is also because I'm really interested in objectification, specifically objectification like of the female body. And this kind of came about like when I was looking into like art history and kind of the history of the female nude, and how like for a long time it was a lot of like classic male painters like mostly painting the female body and what this meant for the actual painting. And I have a quote here about the difference between like the male gaze and the female gaze in my work, and so I'll read that to you. Laura Mulvey originally coined the term the male versus like female gaze. So yeah, this is from her. So the male gaze tends to objectify and sexualize women, my hands are shaking, reducing them to passive objects of desire for the pleasure of the heterosexual male viewer. In contrast, the female gaze offers a subversion of this dynamic, empowering women to assert their own subjectivity and agency within the visual realm. So yeah, I think this kind of like ties into my work because there's like an interesting relationship, because I am like the subject and the painter, and how that is kind of like taking control of the painting versus in the past, like women have been so passive and when represented nude. So yeah, that's definitely something that's important to me. But I also think like the easiest way to kind of understand my art is to just talk about each painting, because they're all so different. So I'm going to start with this one here. Sorry, you don't have to move, it's really fun, but you can look at it later. So this is my piece called Spain, and it really is drawn kind of from my experience growing up in Alabama and like the college like process. So when I was like thinking about applying to colleges, like most of the people from my high school were going to University of Alabama or Auburn, and like really wanted to be in sororities. And I don't know, maybe some of you like recognize this from like things you've heard about sororities, but it's inspired by like kind of rumors about how the like hazing of like people rushing in sororities, like they would like force these girls to like get naked and sit on dryers that were on, and then whatever jiggled like on the dryers, like the girls would like circle. So it was really like, I don't know, honestly I found it really terrifying and it really stuck with me, of these rumors, and so I was really inspired to like paint it. And I feel like the painting kind of became something else, like once I started painting it, and I started thinking about like, I included this like stain remover bottle, like right between the figure's legs, and I was thinking about how like vaginas are like seen as like a stain on society, because like society is like so uncomfortable with like talking about vaginas, and like yeah, so it's just kind of like vagina's just like underrepresented in society. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about in this piece. And then this also kind of ties into the piece in the back there. You can look at it later, but it's called Baggage. And some of you know this about me, but when I was in high school, I was actually in a high school sorority, which was like a common thing in the Deep South. And I was like 15 when I joined, and like part of the hazing like ritual for this was like we had to carry around a brick for an entire summer. And so I just like had this like literal brick that I like put on a ribbon and just like carried it around everywhere with me that summer. And if they saw me without it, like I would get in trouble. So that kind of inspired this painting, and like obviously I was 15, like kind of like I don't know, like growing up like during this time, like you know, like becoming a woman and stuff, and then like I have this like literal like symbol of like the weight of like what it means to like grow up like female in this like society. So yeah, that's kind of like where that comes from. And then yeah, I can also go ahead and talk about Bait here, which is like the piece that was on my card. I think that's like that, but yeah, so this is kind of changing topics a little bit. But in this piece, I was thinking about, I used to like fish when I was little. Like I would like go to like creeks and like just like grab fish with my hands, like in like the beaches in Alabama. But anyway, so that was like kind of an inspiration for this. But also, I'm thinking about like how like as like a feminine queer woman, like how people like perceive me in like conservative societies, and I don't know, just how like a lot of society in the Deep South like sees like femininity as like a sort of measure of heterosexuality. And so I was thinking about that in this piece, and like how the fish kind of like represent male attention, and it's like grabbing onto like my body, even though it's like unwanted. And so I was thinking about that, and like yeah, viewing myself as the bait in this piece. And yeah, something else I can talk about real quick is just like how important like the actual gaze of the figure is in like my pieces. Like some of them you can see are like staring off into the distance, or like more passive, where others are like kind of challenging you to like engage with like the subject matter. So yeah, this piece is the title of my show, I Don't Want to Be Queer, I Want to Be Pretty. And I can talk about the title first, and then I'll get into the piece. But basically, when I was growing up, I remember an adult in my life said, like, one of my friends had like come out as queer, and an adult in my life had said like, oh, like I was asking them about it, and like I was pretty young, and I remember them saying like, oh, that person's like a lesbian because like guys don't think she's pretty, but like, you know, I was just like, oh, okay, like I don't want to be queer, I want to be pretty. So like that's kind of like where the title like came from. And so in this piece, I kind of like view the mirror as like a dividing line here, and like how like society like sees me one way, they see me as like feminine, like straight person, whereas like they don't really see like the other side of me, like the queer side of me. But yeah, that's like a brief overview of my art. Like if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thanks so much for listening. Okay, if there's no question. Oh, yeah.
So just looking at like all the different objects that are in the piece that are kind of like alongside the figure of you, what do you typically start with? Like when you created this piece, with like you started with that narrative, and then like in creating both the setting and then how you situate the body in that, I guess what's your process?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. So yeah, I feel like I don't know, like the actual like inspiration comes up like in like weird places. Like I feel like I like common like household areas like laundry rooms or like kitchens or bathrooms. But as far as like my actual process, like I have like a little like selfie like stick thing and I just like set it up and like take pictures, like reference photos of myself. So I think it's like, I don't know, it's funny, but like it really like helps me like, you know, control the narrative of my pieces, and I think it's cool because yeah, I am the subject and the painter, so like I really like have control of that. But then like yeah, as I'm painting, I kind of like I painted the washer on this. It's actually a washing machine, not a dryer. But anyway. But and then like I don't know, for a long time I like debated whether or not to like show like the vagina on this, but then like I realized it might be more powerful to like put the stain remover there, and so like I kind of worked through that like as I was thinking about it. So, yeah. Oh yeah.
How did you choose the different mediums? Because I know you have some charcoal and some oil.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with painting. Like I love it, but it's just hard sometimes. So I like to like take breaks from painting sometimes and like focus on charcoal, because like charcoal is much quicker and like I don't know, I feel like it's a nice break from painting. But I do love like painting, and painting just feels like so like I don't know, just like more like real, like in the way the colors work. It just yeah, I don't know, it just feels like heavier in some ways. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, but I do enjoy, I feel like I learned from charcoal too, because like, you know, I feel like my actual like anatomy of like the body gets better too when I do charcoal, so yeah.
What was it like to kind of analyze and paint your own body nude? I mean, I feel like you have to become very familiar with what your body looks like and very kind of comfortable with that and knowing what you, so what was that like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I've been doing it since like freshman year. Yeah, and yeah, I started in advanced painting, and like, I don't know, like, I think it just felt like kind of natural to me in some ways, like as like a next step in like my painting process. And yeah, I don't know, I think like after, yeah, the first painting was like maybe a little weird, and like it felt weird to like be exposed to people, but then like after a while, like I realized how like powerful the vulnerability of it was, and like how like these important messages like come across. Like I felt like it like necessary to like be nude, and so yeah, I don't know, I think I just became comfortable with it after lots and lots of practice. So yeah.
What draws you to these like cold tiled spaces?
Yeah, I think I like the order of them. Like, I think my paintings, like the subject's like very chaotic and like, I don't know, heavy, and like, I feel like the order is just, and the, like the grids that the tile makes, it's like a nice contrast, like against like the heavy like subject matter. So yeah, also they're a pain to paint, but like it is like, I don't know, I feel like fulfilling in the end when it's like, oh wow. So, yeah. Yeah. There's no more questions.
I've been working on one. I was interested in your comment about the gaze, and I think that definitely made it challenging to install the show,
Yeah.
because the gaze is so strong in these paintings that it couldn't be set up every way you tried. But I think it is really interesting, as I've been looking at these paintings, that the gaze seems to line up with how, or the willingness for the you in the painting to be gazing at us, is lined up with how powerful the color is in the painting. And the coldest ones seem to be the most removed, whereas the warmer ones, ending in the shout, probably being most warm, is directly looking at us. And I think that there's an interesting process to thinking about taking ownership of that, and how the color seems to spontaneously line up with that. I would love for you to talk a little bit about the uncontrolled nature that's in painting. I think so often we want to know about what was actually dictated or what you had in your mind, but often I find the most interesting questions come from the things that we never expected but felt like a gift. And I think that is a gift in this work. And so I was hoping you could share some other gifts from your practice.
I think it's interesting because, like, yeah, like, I feel like I don't always, like, I know we were talking about this, but, like, when setting up, like, the compositions of my pieces, like, I don't know, like, I just think it, like, comes, like, kind of, like, naturally, but then, like, I was talking to you about it, and, like, how, like, I do a lot of things in, like, threes, like, figure, object, object, and then, like, kind of, like, similar things, and I didn't even realize that I was doing that. So yeah, I feel like there are like a lot of like unconscious things with painting that I don't really realize. And yeah, definitely with the colors, like honestly, like yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but it makes a lot of sense because I am like very interested in like sterile things, and I think like when I'm creating like a piece that's like very heavy, like I think it's nice to like have like a sterileness to it, so it just feels like, I don't know, maybe it makes it more heavy, but it feels less heavy too in some ways, so yeah.
Are there any other questions? All right, with that, we will close for today. Thank you I'm sure Sarah will be open to answering other questions in person too, so feel free to enjoy the opening and food. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you.